Mr. Speaker, will you please call the House to order?
The bill is passed.
We'd like to get a budget that represents the interests of the people who are standing here with me now.
To be part of the struggle to achieve a better society for all.
And that's why today I'm very pleased to cast my vote in the affirmative. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Assembly Update. I'm Liz Koenig. Today we're going to be talking about New York's direct care workforce and the push to increase funding in this year's state budget to support families and individuals that depend on these services and the quality of life and independence. And joining me to discuss this topic is my guest, who serves as the State Assembly's chair on the Subcommittee on Autism Spectrum Disorders. Assemblyman Angela Santabarbara represents the 111th Assembly District, Albany, Schenectady, and Montgomery counties. Thank you very much for coming in today.
Thanks, Liz. Great to be here.
Great to see you. Now, this is an issue that's been talked about for quite some time here at the state capitol. What exactly is happening with New York's direct care workforce?
Well, you're right. It is an issue that's not something new. It's something that's been discussed for a few years here at the state capitol. And what it comes down to is there's a crisis, a workforce crisis, where direct care positions are going unfilled. We're seeing a turnover rate that's almost 30% now, and we're seeing jobs that are just vacant. We're seeing jobs that are not being filled, people that are leaving the direct care workforce for other jobs. Part of that reason is because the funding has not been there to support this essential part of our community. And for those that don't know, direct care involves taking care of human beings. We have more than 128,000 New Yorkers with developmental disabilities, their families that rely on these services, but the providers depend on almost 90% of their funding comes from government sources. So this is another push we're making this year to get funding included in the state budget that supports New York's direct care workforce.
Now, talk a little bit more about how these direct care services are funded.
Well, in my district, we have Schenectady ARC, we have Liberty ARC, and you might have heard of those names locally here, but there are agencies like that across the entire state. They do fundraising, they try and raise funds, they do the best they can, but they really rely on government funding. They rely on what we do in the state budget, they rely on some other sources of funding as well, reimbursement rates, but without an increase in the funding, what we're seeing is they can barely keep up with the minimum wage. Actually, the numbers have gotten so bad because they haven't seen an increase since 2008. That's a very long time to go with the same or even less funding in some cases. And the other part of this to compound this issue is that a lot of times the reimbursements they lag behind. They don't receive those funds right away for services that they do provide. So it causes a complex problem that's leading to, again, a crisis because what we're seeing is we're seeing people do the work of 2 and 3 positions. We have one person now doing the same work because people have left. We're seeing a turnover rate where people take the jobs and are not able to keep them. And again, they're leaving for other jobs. And the people that work in direct care have a passion for this work. It's about taking care of people, making sure they have a quality of life, making sure that they can achieve as much independence as possible. And the people that do this work, they have a passion for it. And a lot of the new people that come into the direct care field, they rely on people that have been there as sort of a mentorship to learn the job. But if we're losing those people, very hard to replace that experience, and that's exactly what's happening. So again, this year's state budget, very critical that we make them a priority. The budget needs to be about putting people first. We really can't do that without supporting New York's direct care.
And what kinds of services are we talking about, and how do those services affect families like yours?
Well, and I could speak to my son Michael. I mentioned him here on the show quite a bit. My son was born with autism. He relies on a lot of the services that we're talking about. So taking medication, bathing, feeding, all direct care work for health and safety. I know that the staff that work with my son, I know how critical they are to his success each and every day, to be able to get through the day, to be able to be as independent as possible, to be able to learn life skills, but also to, again, getting dressed in the morning, brushing teeth, hygiene, taking care of himself, all those items are part of what direct care is all about. And I speak very passionately about this because I live it every day. So I know from direct experience, but there are thousands of families out there that are depending on these services. This really is a commitment from the state to support these families, to support, again, more than 128,000. That's a very big number. And the families are depending on direct care to be there. It's devastating, to when these positions go unfilled, to know that somebody's been there to provide these services, to take care of these individuals, and to find one day that that person is gone or has been replaced. It's devastating to people. It's devastating to individuals. It's devastating to families. Again, since 2008, we haven't seen any increases. So we're starting to see people just leave the field. And again, it's very hard once they're gone to get them back. And many times we can't get them back, and you can't really replace that experience.
Now, what are some of the proposals in this year's state budget that you're hoping to get passed?
Well, the funding, of course, is top priority. We have to include the funding in the state budget to support New York's direct care workforce to at least be able to compete with other jobs, to pay above minimum wage. And let's face it, these are not minimum wage jobs. These jobs require passion. They have a lot of training, a lot of skill that goes along with it. There's a lot of on-the-job training, a lot of experience that can't be replaced. So it's not a minimum wage job. It's something where fair wages should be far above minimum wage, and we're just not there yet. So getting that funding in place is very important, but also continuing that down the road because, again, we have to reverse this trend because we continue to see vacancy rates, turnover rates, and we have to reverse this trend. And to do that, we have to support the direct care workforce, but also continue to do that not only in this budget, but in future budgets as well, and make sure that that funding is there. Also, a proposal that's been pitched, to answer your question, is a credentialing program that's been pitched. I'm not sure if it'll be in this year's state budget, but certainly something to also attract attract people to the direct care workforce, to have some sort of credentialing, some education that can go along with it, so that people can, learn the job, but also have some educational experience behind them as well. So it's a field that they can make a career out of. So that's something that we're talking about at this point, and I hope to see that continue, whether it's not in the budget. Whether or not it ends up in the budget, I don't know at this point. It could, but if not, there is further discussion that I hope to continue on that. It's something that the direct care workforce is supportive of, and I think it's something very important to sort of elevate the status of direct care workers, because they haven't been talked about in a long time. And now this is a conversation that we're having, and it's great to see that people are learning more and more about what direct care means to our state.
Now, talk about some of the nonprofit agencies in your district that provide these services.
And it's sort of a unique way they're funded. And as I mentioned earlier, Schenectady ARC I mentioned, Liberty ARC, but there's a number of other providers. They're just funded in a unique way. They rely on reimbursement rates. They rely on government funding. So they're really at the mercy of what we do in government, whether or not they can continue to provide these services. One of the things that's not mentioned, that should be mentioned, is also supportive housing. People trying to find a place to live, to have those supports, but you really can't have supportive housing, even though there's a great need, without direct care going along with it, because you do need people to staff the houses. And there has been cases, I know with Schenectady ARC, where they've had to turn away some of the housing opportunities because they just don't have the staff to be able to provide services at those locations. So this funding, the funding that we provide, really, a lot of other things depend on it.
Now, this has been included in the Assembly's budget?
Yeah, the Assembly, has led the way with providing this funding for our New York's direct care workforce. We hope to see it make it through to the final budget this year, and we hope to see it in future budgets as well. I think we've successfully turned the conversation to talk about New York's direct care and what it means to so many people. So the Assembly budget I'm very pleased with, and I hope that we can get through the final budget with that funding in there. Of course, we'd like to see more in future budgets, but there's more to be done post-budget as well. But again, I'm very happy with the Assembly's proposal.
And what has been the experience in the past with this issue?
A few years ago, we did see some funding in the state budget that ended up in the state budget for direct care workers, but it was simply just not enough to have the impact that we wanted to turn this trend around. Even after that funding was included, we still continued to see turnover. We still continue to see vacancies increase. And again, 20-30%. When you start seeing these numbers, it should be alarming to everybody, because what it means is there's people out there now not receiving services that they've depended on virtually sometimes their entire life. And to see families that don't have access to these services anymore is really devastating. And I hear, we've heard people have shared personal experiences back home, but across the state. We had a rally here not too long ago where people came up to share their stories. And it's it puts a reality to it, what it means, how people have had to give up someone that they know that has been working with them, and now that person is no longer there, but not by choice, but because it became a financial decision. That's the sad part about all this, is that we may not get some of those people back, but we hope to move forward and to attract new people into the direct care workforce. It really does define who we are as a community, supporting this funding in the budget, to say that this is important. It's a critical part of our community. It's important to these families, so it has to be important to us up here.
It's got to be incredibly difficult for a person receiving the services in their family, as well as the caregiver, to have to make that decision between, geez, I can't really, make rent this month. I need to change occupations.
And what happens, and that's exactly what happens. It becomes a financial decision, and what we're seeing is that the people that have a passion. This job, as I said, it's not minimum wage. It's about taking care of people. It's about taking care of human beings. And we when it comes to funding, we need to prioritize that. I think that's important.
Now tell me about the Be Fair to Direct Care movement and their message here at the state capitol.
Well, we just had a tremendous rally not too long ago. Be Fair to Direct Care has been a movement that's been growing, and it's exactly what it is. Be fair, number 2, to direct care. And it's a growing coalition of service providers, and not just in direct care, but even beyond that. And we had a rally here at the Capitol, and it was absolutely astonishing. It was amazing to see how many people showed up all the way down the staircase, and it shows how important this is. It shows that people are fighting for this. It's clearly important to our community. So it's something that should be a priority. When you see that many people show up in support of this, I was happy to have my local agencies here. As I mentioned them again, I'll give them another shout out, Schenectady ARC and Liberty ARC, but it was so much more than that. There was so many more agencies, self-advocates, families, parents, and the experiences they shared with their direct care experience was just heartwarming, and I was able to hear those stories and support their efforts, and I think it had a significant impact, and hopefully that will inspire others to support this as we get through this budget process this year.
And what are you hopeful to see included in the state budget?
Well, I'm hoping we can at least match the assembly number, match the funding amount, which would begin to address the issue, start to reverse that trend. I'm hoping to see that in this budget, but I'm also hoping to see down the road future budgets also not leave direct care behind, as has been done in the past. As I said, they haven't received an increase really since 2008. That's far too long, and you can see the impacts are being felt by so many in the community. So we don't want that to happen again. We want to have support that's sustainable. It is important. I think people have realized that at this point.
And we want to remind people of your newsletter.
Yes. I will remind people that they can keep track, stay up to date on this issue and the work I do as chair of the subcommittee on autism spectrum disorders. They can sign up for my Autism Action Alerts, which is a newsletter they can receive by mail or by website or by email on my website at www.state.ny.assembly.us under Assemblyman Angela Santa Barbara, and they can also sign up to receive invitations to my autism events that are happening. April is Autism Awareness Month. I have quite a few going on, so I encourage you to sign up and you'll get alerts and be invited to those special events in our community.
And there's one at the Capitol too.
There's one at the Capitol coming up right around the corner on April 10th.
Great, thank you so much. We've been speaking with Assemblyman Angelo Santa Barbara, who represents the 111th Assembly District, Albany, Schenectady, and Montgomery counties. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.